Welcome, everyone. This is our July voice and song session, and I'm very happy to have some voice experts in the house, including Carolyn Baker. Some of you will know from the Voice and Song Summit. Carolyn is a singing teacher, but also teaches teachers, and she has an amazing program to help people set up their own singing practice, teaching others. Mark Cox is joining us from the New York area, and he is a counselor who also works with the voice. So he brings together voice and mental health and using, voice as a tool for wellness. And then we also have Gerry Wohlman coming to us from Australia, who's a presentation coach who helps people to find an authentic voice for speaking. So let's get into this. Today we're starting with a concept of, when should we speak, when should we not speak, and how do we protect those who don't have a chance to speak? Mark, I'd like to invite you to start off the conversation, as this was a topic that you have a passion for. So off you go and tell us what was happening in your mind. What brought this to mind, this topic today?
Sure, Carolyn. When I'm working, I work with the voice as a physical voice, and then I also work with the voice as a metaphor. So for your fuller expression in life, your willingness to speak. And oftentimes what I encounter is people that have had their voice shut down from them for some reason, right? It could be abuse, whether it be verbal, physical, or otherwise. But what happens when that has been your experience is that it becomes a safety mechanism to not speak. Silence becomes your safety, not to be noticed. And oftentimes this happens with children. Children are to be seen, not heard, right? As the expression goes. And so we train people in some ways in society that their voice should not be given out. And as we get older, people realize that it's not serving them anymore to be silent. And yet they're afraid. And there's other people that have learned how to dominate and use their voice, and they think that they have a powerful voice. They're very proud of that they can domineer over people with their voice. And that's not an appropriate use of it. That is hurting people. It's not helping people. And so what happens is the people that are underneath that, they never really get the chance to say something. And part of it is their own training, their own background. But I think that there's an attitude in which, we as vocal professionals, we that are working with the expressions of people, there are times where we actually have to say, you need to stop using your voice. You need to stop expressing yourself here because you're trampling on others. And so we need to have them stop and help these people to be lifted up so that we can create an equal conversation. So that's something that has been really passionate for me recently.
It's so deep as well. Like, I really feel that it's such an essential awareness to have. It's not an awareness that I have naturally. And I remember when I was working in health stores, I was with someone. There was a teacher and they were talking to a customer, and I interjected, and I was told afterwards that was not the right thing to do. And that would have been my tendency, is to be very much, we're like jumping in and just a bit of a blurter. But then on the other hand, I've also realized that I don't express emotions well enough, and I will keep those very silent, and I will keep those very inside me. So we can have, I suppose, our own, our voice comfort zones and our voice discomfort zones. And I think what you're speaking about also is, I think as someone who's in charge at times, or a leader at times, to notice what's actually going on with the people in the room, so that there is a forum for those who don't feel at that moment safe enough to speak.
Absolutely. And I think that what you are describing as, being willing to put yourself out there and to dominate the conversation, but yet not being willing to put your own emotions out there, in my experience, that is really prevalent. That's very, very prevalent. I want to control the emotions of others, but I'm not going to open myself up to having mine expressed.
Oh my God, I'm getting therapy right now, Mark. But it's complex, you know what I mean? And it's not like somebody who's interjecting isn't always trying to do it for a nefarious reason. It could be something, you know, it's just, it can be many reasons, but we need to be more aware of the circumstances that we're in, be more aware of the people that we're around, and the timing of when to say something. And that's been a huge lesson of mine. It's been timing. Gerry, you want to jump in?
Thank you. I'm going to provide the opposite extreme on the other side of the spectrum. A number of years ago, I was leading a Speaking from the Heart workshop for a group of dance and movement enthusiasts in Hawaii. And one of the people in this group is a conscious movement, 5 rhythms teacher in New York City, actually. And he had talked with me during the break about how he sometimes forgets what he has to say. That was just the tip of the iceberg. When he stood in front of all of these international dancers and movement lovers and teachers, I asked him, what's really going on? He said, well, actually, I don't feel safe to speak up at all. I said, that's interesting. What is it that happened when you were younger? He said, well, I was brought up in Brooklyn, and I was always being physically and emotionally attacked by my fellow peers. And so I have a feeling, even though I'm teaching people in my classes all the time and they're following my guidance with my movement expression and instruction, I'm terrified. I know he was crying at this point. I'm terrified because I feel like when I'm standing in front of people, I'm going to be attacked. And so his admitting that while crying in front of the group was a powerful turnaround for him in shifting his belief that it's not safe to speak to. People kept coming up to him, your vulnerability, your courage, your authenticity. This is the kind of person I like to warm up to. And then with his tears streaming down his face at the end of this process, he said, it's safe for me to speak up and be heard. I like it. And it only took a few minutes. To be witnessed and to admit to the situation where he had been held back was a very powerful breakthrough moment. So it's the opposite extreme of not speaking. Someone who had been not speaking suddenly feels freer to share his wisdom and message with ease.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it brings to mind also that the person with the most wisdom in the room can be the one who's holding themselves back, you know. And what are we missing when we don't include everyone?
Exactly.
Carolyn.
One of the things I often like to share on that level is often, as I see it, the shyest or the boldest.
Can you repeat that?
A good example of that. The shyest are the boldest. Yeah.
The shyest?
The meek shall inherit the earth. Yeah, the
Yeah.
shyest are the boldest. I was working again one time with a 13-year-old, a young girl, with a group of about 80 young teenagers. And it was for them to introduce themselves in front of a group. There was 80 of them, so I do it really quickly. And this one was really tiny in her expression and like a mouse. And I didn't want to make fun of her being a mouse. God, you're talking so sweetly, so softly, like a mouse would. Tell you what, would you be willing to go underneath this chair here and just keep out your name for everybody? And she did. I'm sorry. And it's just like there's nothing there. I said, now, what would be the opposite of that, Sally? If you could really just imagine the opposite of a mouse. She said, a lion. I said, a lion. Okay, good. Tell you what, go to the back of the room, come running up to the stage like a lion, and then just say your name. See what happens. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry. The shyest was the boldest. Like having permission, one, to do what she was already feeling shy and scared about, and then to encourage her to do the opposite. On the other hand, she freed up what was holding her back.
I absolutely love that example, because as well, you needed a physical understanding, you know, from anyone's perspective. Sometimes we don't really see what's going on, but going under a chair versus running into the room, it makes it so tangible, that vocal difference of simple volume. You created imagery around that. It made it a very tangible change, and just, that's genius, Gerry. That's why you do what you do, I guess.
That's what I'm doing. It's what I call the double extreme. It's with any condition. It can be done with voice, with gesture. It can be done with anything. So by exaggerating what a person's already doing but feeling self-conscious about, giving them permission, then doing the opposite, then doing the best of both. Generally, then the energy of the one and the sensitivity of the other come through even more than being told what to do. Out comes the natural essence by going further in both extremes than a person ever used to. So it's called the double extreme tool. I often use that in my presentation coaching.
Wow, genius. And I will definitely be keeping that in my toolbox for future reference.
Absolutely.
Love that. Very nice.
It is to share.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if anyone watching has that experience of not knowing where that balance is, try it yourself. You don't need to have someone do it with you. Get under a table. I've got a table right here. Go outside and run across the garden. Why not? So Carolyn, you haven't said much yet. Would you like to chime in?
I was loving what Mark and Gerry were saying, because it comes out in singing lessons too. And generally people don't even realize, but when I say to them, you know, pick a song, that song relates to their life and themselves somehow, and it always comes out later. So I remember I had this precious young teenage girl years and years ago, and she came in and she was very, very quiet. And she brought these really bold, angry female girl songs where she wanted to roar. And she said, I want to sound like this. And I said, okay, let's work towards it. So anyway, she was with me for 6 months. And about halfway through, something happened in the song. And I said to her, you know, when people hurt you, what do? Do you go quiet and walk away and wait for them to come to you? Or do you let them know what they've done in an angry way or in a calm way? Do you let them know? She said, oh, I walk away and I hope that they come to me. And I said, and do they? And she said, no, they don't. And I said, okay, that's interesting. I wonder what would happen if, you know, ... And anyway, at the end of the 6 months, I think it was 2 weeks before we finished, she was telling me a story, and she said she was going to do something. And I said, oh, what if you do this? She said, that's exactly what I said I was going to do. And I was so excited because she had just told me off.
Mm-hmm.
She told me. And I said, you just told me off. And she said, oh, no, I didn't. I said, yes, you did. I said, that's amazing. I said, well done. She just looked at me like, what? And I said, you know, 3 months ago, you said you didn't tell people what you were feeling. I said, but you just told me. And I'm so incredibly amazed at what you just did. You can be proud of yourself. Anyway, and she was singing her angry, loud girl voices, songs that she was wanting to sing by the end of that 6 months. And so just the process of coming in, but wanting something else. And then being given tools along the way to help you find it. It's a big deal. You know, and that's what you were saying, Gerry. You know, you gave specific tools so that that person could come out, you know. And that's so important. It's so important. So anyway, yeah, as your stories were reminding me of this precious, precious person.
It's amazing.
Who's now a young woman and very bold in herself, which is very exciting, and still incredibly gentle. So best of both.
This is it. It's about figuring out what we need to be in the situation that's at hand.
Yeah.
So in terms of group work, Carolyn, have you had any do you have any insight on kind of helping the quiet people in a big group to participate, or how, sometimes someone wants to dominate a group situation?
Yes. So I was just saying earlier to everybody, I'll say the same thing, that sometimes in group situations, you do have people that will want to speak more, or that have more opinion, or that think that they're very good, and they can be quite loud. But they might also be the people that feel most insecure about their voice, is what I find generally. That the people that will say things about other people's voices are trying to control the situation for some reason. And therefore, I need to be gentle with the person that's being loud because they're feeling vulnerable. But I also have to be protective of everybody in the group, and listening for each of their individual needs, because that's why people come to a group lesson, for their own individual needs, not the group need generally, unless they're coming for a specific group need, like training for a performance together. But even then, there's individual needs. Anyway, that's off the track.
Oh, I don't think so. I think it's really on track.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's nearly midnight here, so my brain's a little tired. So you have to make sure at the start of a group lesson that you say, this is a protective space where you're allowed to be vulnerable. And I'm letting you know now that we're not going to talk about other people's voices. You can talk about your own voice, and the strengths and growth points that you want in your own voice. But we won't be talking about other people's voices, because then the moment we do, people will shut down, and we want this to be an open space. So a while ago, when I was doing a group lesson, I forgot to say that at the start to a new group. And it became very clear why I needed to say that at the start, because somebody that was needing to work on their voice, and maybe had some pretty big other things going on in their life, which I didn't know at the time at the start of that lesson, but I found out later from that person. They started saying, this person needs to work on that, and this person needs to work on that in their voice, and this person needs to work on that. And I had to say, everyone gets to talk about their own voice. We don't talk about each other's voices. Everything that I just said a moment ago. And I said, and that's just to protect everybody. But then later on again, it happened again. And I said, that's okay. I've asked this person is going to tell me about their own voice. So even though it was a bit of a shock to this louder person, that I was being firm, but I was being firm and kind. And in doing that, I was protecting them from keeping a friendship, which could have gotten broken. But I was also protecting the people who were there because they were having their voices spoken about. So I think it's good to remember that even if somebody's loud, that doesn't mean that they feel safe. And if a person is quiet, that doesn't necessarily mean that they feel unsafe. It means we need to watch and listen, and that's the huge part about teaching singing, is watching and listening and observing people, not just their voices. So yeah, I think best not to assume, and ask lots of questions, and then listen and watch.
Yeah. And what you said at the in there as well was, set that expectation from the beginning. That what is this space for, and how are we going to use it? I know that I use that a lot with my open mic. I'll say, I'd love everyone to give feedback, encouraging feedback, and that way everybody kind of understands that we're there to cheerlead for each other. It's not for anything else. But it's so beautiful. And when you were talking, I was just like, wow, this is the sort of attitude that we want our political leaders to have, and understanding that they might have, So I'm very impressed with you, Carolyn. And
Thank
but
you.
it is,
I feel the same about all of you.
but it's sometimes, it's a subtle skill to be able to handle the dynamics of a group and to understand who's speaking, who isn't speaking, and why. And why. And that, I think, is the key. Why are they doing this? Why am I blurting? Because it happens to me sometimes. And I think, we all come in with our personality traits, and
our history and our trauma.
Oh God. I know, but I feel like when we work with what we are, what we've come through, that's where we develop our superpowers. So in the situations that I need to be quiet and observant and intuitive, I can do that now, but like it might have taken me nearly half a century to get really good at it. So if anyone's listening and feels like, I don't know if I'll ever be good at this, it actually, if you're bad at it and you decide to become good at it, you get better at it than someone who's natural, I think, because you're extra careful with how you go about doing it.
Yeah. And sorry,
go ahead.
Am I allowed to just say a sentence?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mark. I saw Mark's hand go up and I was like, oh, hold on. And I wanted to say, connected with that, Aideen, is that I was never confronting a confrontational person growing up. But I've had to learn the skill to say things firmly and with respect and kindness. And there have been situations where I have had to be extremely firm, and I've had to, if someone starts going somebody in the room, I've had to stand up and say some really firm things, because it's happened in front of people to stop an abusive situation happening. I've had to say something strong, not abusive, but something strong, still respectful, to stop the situation happening. And that is a skill that I've had to learn. And the people that the abuse was happening to appreciated it. Other people in the room laughed because they felt nervous. But that person that started it saw what they were doing. And that was a big deal, because no one had ever stood up to this person before. But because I had been the person called in to help a group, and I was an external person, they basically said to me at the start, look, this person might be an issue. We need you to stand up. And I said, well, I'm an external person. If it comes up, I'll stand up. So I got warned in advance, but sometimes if it's happening in front of you and there's other people that are watching, sometimes you need to stop it there. And I did talk to that person later and say, I'm sorry that I had to do it in front of everyone, but you were doing it in front of everyone and I had to stop it quickly, because everyone has to be protected, including you. Beautiful. And they respected that. So, but it was full on.
Yes, you had to be more of the lion than the mouse in that moment.
Yeah. That's a lot of prayer went into that. But yes.
I think
I'll put mine on mute now.
Yeah. Mark, go ahead.
I just wanted to express appreciation for Carolyn's approach in that. I think that skill is absolutely one of the hardest to really get right. And I think one of the reasons is because, number one, you have to be aware of an abusive situation. And you have to be aware that it is that. You have to be able to call it that in your own mind, right? But then once you're sensitive to that and you realize that it's an abusive situation, sometimes heading, like confronting the confrontation in the room feels like you are the perpetrator of the abuse, right? It feels as if I'm the one that's about to escalate this situation. It would be better if I just let it go, right? And so I love the fact that she said firm but kind. It makes me think of, you build a wall of safety, and the speed and the strength at which people come and try to crash against that wall, that's not your fault. as the leader. The wall has to stand for the safety of everyone. And if they run at it really hard, they might hit it really hard, but that's not your fault, right? And so I really just appreciated all of that about what Carolyn said, and just illustrating some really good skill. So I appreciate you, Carolyn.
Yeah, and to be able to do it in that moment, and we never know when each of us are going to be called on to stand up in that way. Gerry?
I also like that example of how you stood up with kindness and firmness at the same time. I'm visualizing a group dynamic with a different example that's an unconscious and unspoken form of what you might call violence or injustice. It's connected with self-talk. I was teaching a workshop one day at the Peabody Conservatory of Music in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was a special session that was set up to have the singers be in front of a mock audience with drummers and percussionists and pianists who were backing them up. And I remember one of the most provocative things that occurred over and over was that singers' perception of, oh, that drummer's not in sync with me, or, oh, the audience isn't going to like me, affected their ability to be singing with full resonance to be heard. So I asked these same singers who admitted, look, I don't trust this audience, or hey, that drummer is just not okay, it's just out of sync. And what would happen if you say out loud to the group, because it was the exploratory group, it wasn't actually a real performance, I'm willing to trust you. I'm willing to see you and sync with me. Or audience, I know that you accept me, or you're more excited and happy to hear me singing than I am nervous to share my wisdom and music and warmth with you. So this was the first stage before they actually, then what's the difference? The difference, of course, that there was more resonance and more rhythm. They were connecting with the person that was backing them up and the audience in a way that actually transformed the relationship. And it's from the self-talk, the thoughts, the words, and then the actions that followed. Very powerful. This is an example of an unconscious way of dealing with the situation where the internal way of being able to be combating with those around are not spoken, yet are echoing and reverberating within before the person actually thinks, speaks, or says the word.
Yeah, and that's the most significant stuff that's going on in our own minds. And in fact, if something does come out, you know what I mean, we do say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing and others see it, that's a real opportunity for that self-talk, that internal dialogue to become manifested in a real thing that you can see, which helps us to deal with it. So talking it out with someone and being asked what's going on in that head of yours is so important. And I think with singers, I'm used to working with singers, in order to stand up in front of an audience, we have to become more self-aware. I think anyone who's a leader, and I see singing as a form of leadership because you have to stand up in front of an audience and hold their gaze for 3.5 minutes minimum. So there's a leadership quality needed, but the leader, the singer, the person standing at the front of the manager requires more self-awareness, and we need to be more, we need to aspire to and learn to be as self-aware as possible.
The difference between being self-aware and self-conscious. And in theater, there's that description of the fourth wall. You know what that is? You know what that is? The fourth wall, where the singer, the performer, the presenter, the speaker is conscious that the audience is watching and that I'm aware of being watched, yet instead of being self-conscious and feeling like I can't come fully in my truth and resonance and presence, it's actually a delightful way of being able to, I know you see me, and I'm also able to notice I'm being seen, and I no longer have to hold myself back or try to reach you so strong. Another example of that is something I like to use with people who are either speaking too loud or holding back, which is an exercise where I ask people to take their right hand and place it at the base of the spine while standing, and to say these words as though you're trying to impress someone out there in the public. These words: it's easy for me to reach you with my message, exaggeratingly loud. And then with that hand that's already at the base of the spine, instead of reaching up and out as though to try, to effort, to struggle to impress someone outside of yourself, what would happen if you set the sound down like a heartfelt spear of intention that goes to the base of you first? Easy for me to reach you with my message. And almost always people say the same thing. When I reach myself first, it's an inside job, I can reach others more easily.
That's beautiful, Gerry. Thank you so much. You're so inspiring me today. And I wanted to go into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes. And because we have a couple of guests listening in, Chris and Lisa, and I hope that you're both ready to participate in a short breakout room of about 10 minutes long. And I'm going to open the rooms now. And when we come back, we can have a little bit more of a general discussion and wind up, and we'll be finishing in about 20 minutes, if that's okay with everybody. So is anybody not able to go into the breakout room? Everyone feeling good about that? I'm going to pause the recording as well. Welcome back. So some interesting stuff came up in the breakout rooms around learning how to navigate situations. And Marka, you had an interesting point on what kind of phrases we can use in order to like negotiate situations. Or I'd love if you would repeat what you said around that, because I think that's something that is very needed.
Sure, and to give credit where credit's due, this is kind of a stolen idea from Carolyn, just earlier, if you've been listening already. And this was Carolyn saying, let's talk about your own voice, not about the other person's voice. In one sense, this is when you come into a disagreement, talking about your own opinion rather than the other person's opinion. So one thing you could say when you have a disagreement with someone is, I think you're wrong. Well, now you're talking about their opinion, right? You're talking about their perspective. You could share the same idea, but flip it around and talk about yourself and say, let me share how my opinion is a little different than that, right? Let me share how I see it a little bit different, right? And now all of a sudden you can even feel how that's softer and it's more intriguing. I'm more able to approach that person in curiosity rather than in judgment. And that kind of thing. And it opens the door for some real conversation. And I think that our world needs that. Our world needs to have the doors open for conversation where we can disagree, sometimes really intensely, and be able to talk about it and be kind.
Beautiful. I'd love Carolyn and Gerry, do you have a phrase or something that might be useful for the listeners today? Gerry?
Yeah, well, in situations where I do a lot of public speaking, presentation, coaching, and when I do groups, there's always someone who is louder than the others. Sometimes they just want to be heard, or they didn't get enough whatever at home, and or they're angry and they have an edge. And when I hear them, I often like to take their communication and put it into different contexts. Something like, I hear that you have something really powerful to share with us all, and it's actually so important that you share it. I want to give you the time and attention that you deserve. Let's meet after this session. Kind of not just soften and go, oh, the balloon deflates. Oh, he's going to hear me. I can be heard, if not at home, at least with him. If not now, then right after this is over. So I'd like to reframe it in a way that they feel heard, but also, again, it's that kindness, that firmness, and the kindness at the same time. That's Carolyn started off at the beginning of this conversation today. So that seems to work really well, to put loud ones for being aggressive and violent and upsetting the space into a place where they feel honored and heard. It's really important what you have to say. Just do it later.
Yeah, beautiful. Carolyn, do you have any other options?
If someone's saying something about somebody else's voice, I'll gently stop that, like I said earlier. But if someone is saying something for themselves, I'll generally start by saying, thank you for saying that, or thank you for your opinion, or thank you for letting me know that's how you feel. Because it takes a lot for someone, whether they're being loud or being quiet, to vocalize what they're feeling, whether it's done in a healthy way or in an unhealthy way. So to acknowledge the effort of saying it, even if it's somebody that says a lot of stuff and interjects and or butts in a lot, it is important to say thank you for voicing what you're feeling and thinking. And like what Gerry was saying, I would like to hear more about that at this appointed time. We have to focus on these things right now, this process, for the whole group. But I would really like to hear what you have to say. So like what Gerry was saying about, there is an important time. I am grateful for you saying something. I mean, if it's a flippant comment that is just them trying to make people laugh, that's different. But if they've said something from the heart, then it's got to be acknowledged.
Beautiful. Lisa or Chris, would you like to chime in? Any comments or solutions that you may have? Lisa? No, I can't hear you, but you're not muted. I'm afraid your audio isn't coming through, Lisa. While Lisa's trying to...
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I had no Wi-Fi on the laptop this morning, so I had to come on my phone, and I'm just having a really bad connection. So what I heard, I really thought was good, but I missed quite a bit.
We will have the recording if you're interested in going back to that. Did you have anything you wanted to comment on?
Not that I can think of right now.
That's perfect. Well, it's great to have you here. Chris?
I think it's been a really great conversation, and I shared with Mark and with Carolyn 2 books that have helped me personally with owning my own voice, and then also like in conversation. One is Boundaries, Where You End and I Begin, and the other one is How to Argue and Win Every Time. And the second one people always chuckle at because they're like, gosh, that sounds like you're just beating somebody up with the book, and it's completely not that at all. It uses the idea of arguing as coming to understanding. It's written by the trial lawyer for Imelda Marcos, if you remember her in the 80s with the 2,000 pairs of shoes from the Philippines. This was her lawyer, but he wrote this book. But anyway, yeah, and it is about I've struggled lifelong as a mumbler. So for me, often to assert my voice, I have to like think about it, like push my voice forward to do that. And so a lot of times if I'm in a conversation with someone who's like, I just shut up and like I'm not letting them try to compete volume wise. I'll just let them go until they run out of gas, and then I'll talk, because I know I'm not a loud speaker. And I used to try to like see if I could, and I like out shout, but like would feel like, well, I can't compete with this person that has such volume. And then I thought, well, there's no competition, let them just run out,
That's a good strategy, Chris. And unfortunately, your sound is a little bit echoey there, but I think I was able to catch most of it. You're saying that you were a mumbler and you would let people just say whatever they had to say until they finished, I think, which is, it's sometimes the only thing you can do in certain situations. We're about to wind things up, but I did want to share one thing that I learned from a previous roommate of mine. And I said something to her, and her response was, "Oh, that hurt my feelings." And the way she said it and the tone of voice that she used completely blew my mind, because my family situation, nobody had ever shared their feelings before in a way that wasn't like slam the door or ignore you for like three days or something. So to understand that there are words we can put on our in situations, and that we can actually explain how we are in a kind, loving way, that doesn't make you feel rejected, but more so makes you feel like, oh, I need to take a look at that, or I need to remind them, perhaps say in my situations, that, oh, I didn't mean it in that harsh way that it came out, or what, because sometimes when we speak, it isn't, our intention doesn't come through clearly in the way that we say what we say, and we need that feedback. So I would encourage everyone today, and I know that some of the voice experts in the room are very good at this, but if you're not good at understanding what's really going on, or you struggle to express yourself, please stay the course and practice and get help if you need it, because your voice is absolutely needed. And if you need to turn down the volume on your voice or turn up the volume on your voice still has tremendous value, and you are needed, and everyone's opinion is needed. It's just finding the correct or the most appropriate timing. So to wind things up, Mark, I'd love you to say your final words, and we will sign off in a few minutes.
Sure. Well, thank you, Aideen, for having me. And obviously, it's just a thrill every time we get together and do this, because you always get to have so many little perspectives and little perspective shifts. I think that the place where my mind is running now is just, let's be open to acknowledging one another's feelings, acknowledging each other's opinions, giving validation for that opinion coming from a fellow human being, whether or not I agree. And if we can start there, I think we'll become much better listeners to one another.
Yeah, beautiful. Carolyn?
Yeah, I've loved this session. Thank you for inviting me again, and getting to spend time with these wonderful people is always good, and hearing the perspectives. So thank you, and yeah, I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, the next one, we won't have one at the beginning of August. The next one is going to be during the month of September, so keep an eye out for that. And thank you so much, Carolyn. I loved what you said.
Well, I love what you guys say too.
Yes, this is a good place to appreciate each other. And Gerry, thank you so much for joining us. It's your first time joining us. I really loved hearing everything you said. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Joy. Privilege, honor to join you all. In following what Mark has just mentioned a few moments ago about honoring each other as humans, I'm reminded in improvisational theater, one of the key ways that one person picks up on what another one has shared is the principle of yes and. So no matter what is shared, the person picks it up and goes, oh, and let's take it this way. So instead of being any combating and resistance, whatever is shared is accepted, is soothed, is uplifted. I do a lot of hand gestures. And then the people who are being heard feel like, oh, well, I'll just be more spontaneous than before, because everyone is rewarding, acknowledging, and reinforcing whatever was just spoken. It doesn't matter whether you agree with it or not. It's a way to continue a dynamic dialogue. And that's so powerful. This is what I appreciated about this session tonight. I had no idea at the beginning. You said, what are you going to share? I don't know what I'm going to share. Diving in the deep end, responding to all of us is a wonderful community, common unity that we are building. I'm very happy to be part of this. Thank you so much for including me.
You're so welcome. I love doing these sessions because I think we who work in the field of voice have so much to offer, and these sessions go on YouTube and they're available for people to listen to later. And if you want to join us on Zoom, you can get in touch with me, and thank you to our guests who came as well. And thank you to everybody who joined us. And thank you, Mark Cox and Gerry Wohlman and Carolyn Baker. And if anybody needs your contact details, let me know. And also, Chris, you did mention 2 books, Boundaries, Where You and I Begin, and How to Argue and Win Every Time. So I will put the details, I'll try and find the details for that and put those in the show notes as well, in case anyone was interested in following up with that. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye. We'll see you next time.